Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this webinar. Our session today is intended to be a jumping off point for the consideration of managed services, when to consider, why to consider, and also some guideposts as to what you should look for in a potential managed services provider. Companies considering a move to the managed services model should understand that it is a different business landscape, and as such, they should become familiar with its distinguishing features. Resellers, integrators, and traditional product oriented solution providers have been migrating to the managed services model for at least a decade, and that transition will continue as more and more companies opt to become managed services providers. Given that managed services are outperforming the overall IT market, this is really no surprise. So, the focus points of our conversation today are understanding what managed services is in the large spectrum of the IT industry, discovering how managed services help businesses evolve with a velocity rarely known before, and learning how to choose the right managed services provider. I'm happy to introduce to you our speakers, Bogdan Manole and Cătălin Sălăgean. Bogdan has been activating in the managed services field for over 10 years now. As business area manager at Accesa, he is responsible for coordinating nearshore operations teams for large companies across Germany and Europe. So his input in this discussion is deeply anchored both in the technical understanding of managed services, teams coordination, and managing business. Cătălin Sălăgean is technical evangelist at accesa and has been directly involved in the technology advocacy and induction, vendor selection processes, so his input will focus on showcasing what you need to be aware of when choosing a managed services provider. Without further ado, let's go straight into business. Bogdan?
Hello, and thank you, Patricia. All roads lead to managed services. Licensed resellers, system integrators, and traditional product-oriented IT solution providers have been migrating to the managed service model for at least a decade. The transition continues as still more companies opt to become managed service providers. The reasons for the shift are clear. Managed services offer a higher growth rate than any other technology sectors, and it's outperforming the overall IT market. This is both a benefit for companies looking to outsource their managed services or transition them from one provider to another, but also a challenge as there are so many options out there. Managed services have gone mainstream and are a key player now in the IT landscape. In the past few years, business overall has been pushing demands for the adoption of managed services as companies are seeking more and more to reduce cost, address gaps, and provide flexibility. The main focus points when considering managed services are infrastructure in place, cloud migration strategy, digital workplace adoption strategy, personnel, cost of operating, and operating efficiency. Of course, the number one reason is the financial aspect. It regards the reduction of TCO, operations, staffing, tools, training, comprehensive support, and predictable costs. Simple pricing. A model of payment should be able to scale up or down depending on the usage. Outsourcing complexity, which is something you will hear a lot in managed services, and improved productivity typically mean that the benefits you obtain around system integration, modernization, cloud migration, skill set, tool set, and staff augmentation are capable of being deployed in a quick manner. There has been a great amount of introduction into new and disruptive technology, and typically that comes with the increased burden of maintaining infrastructure and application reliability and performance. It's a challenge to do all this without any additional risk, costs, and resources, which in our economy tend to be overly stretched. So, I think it's fair to say that every enterprise has considered outsourced managed services. Regarding the why consideration, why do companies move to managed services? Typically because they are faced with some challenges such as IT professional staffing, when finding qualified personnel that are easily hireable and specialize in the need of the infrastructure and application suite. Considering the 24/7 availability comes at extra cost and churn rates. Staying up to date with evolving technologies, tools, security, monitoring, and IT skills. Managing and maintaining current infrastructure, understanding different platform and enterprise solutions support requirements, the need to have predictable costs. All those things need to be taken into consideration. Securing data, transactions, and communications, responding quickly to time to market demands, remaining flexible enough to maintain competitive position or reducing cost margins and overhead. In terms of the time factor, when is the time to consider managed services? The actual question you should be asking is it time to upgrade, to move or relocate existing infrastructure? Is the scope and scale of your business operations changing? A lot of time, managed services come into play when there is a shift in size or bottleneck occurrence pattern. Timing and competition drive the need to increase services a lot of times, and this, of course, targets the adoption of new technology. Some other common stated reasons for choosing managed services, apart from cost reductions, are an organizational preference to focus on core competencies and processes rather than dedicating resources to support the day-to-day network applications. More on the lines of having specific support requirements that you don't want your staff to do, such as infrastructure management or server patching, performance management, incident management, and so on. The ability to purchase specialized services that complement core business applications, a concern with security and the ability to meet privacy or security regulations, better tools and well-trained dedicated resources, experiencing dynamic business growth during downsizing and hiring freezes. So, when decisions are made to adopt managed services or transition them from one vendor to another, how do you take that initial discussion to consulting with potential providers? You want to begin the evaluation processes with companies that can support your environment, obviously. There is a lot of data on the systems you have. You are going to be asked to provide numerous reports, configuration, etc. You will have to answer a great deal of business questions as well. Some clients elect to provide all that in one take and use an RFP process at this stage. All this content merges into a managed service custom proposal that will contain individual SLAs and service mix to fit your need. Managed services is intended to be a very customizable set of services specifically tailored to meet your needs. So keep that in mind as you focus on the offering. Another aspect that should be uncovered in this process is the risk factors. Do you have legacy equipment, legacy products, capacity issues, or security issues? All of that should be properly vetted in the proposal design phase. The next step is really the creation of the scope of work. The scope of work is the document that will govern your agreement, and after all the hype is stripped away, this document will detail exactly what you will be receiving. It's the control point of the entire agreement. So you want to make sure that this has a clear budget time frame and that is in accordance with your negotiated SLAs. Next will be the operate and improve phase. Live management, continual improvement, issues identification, escalation and resolution, satisfaction audits, regular service management meetings, scalability management, and many more. This enables your business to maximize your investment and maintain control of operations while freeing your IT staff to shift focus to a more strategic initiatives. So there are a lot of considerations here with a highly customizable portfolio of managed services. Contracting to a third party for the management and ongoing operations or applications or tasks can be daunting. The end goal of managed services is really to minimize downtime, optimize costs, scale when needed, and ensure accessibility, compliance, and security. I will now let my colleague Katalin tell you more about what you need to pay attention to when choosing your managed service provider from a procurement point of view.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Bogdan, for sharing your overview of managed services. So I'd like to complement your insights with 6 key elements to keep into account when choosing the right managed services provider. And these are: identify added value and expertise, best practices implementation, availability and a proactive approach, consistent processes and global service delivery, performance-based service level agreements, or SLAs, and flexibility and innovation with a long-term partnership. Now, I will try to elaborate each one of these elements. The first one would be identify added value and expertise. So when selecting the right managed services provider, the technical skills overlap with your internal team or other managed services providers. So differentiators are cultural fit, cost, portfolio range, and complexity. You should look for how the managed services provider is going to invest back in your company, how they follow IT best practices, and what testimonials recommend them. An experienced managed services provider has the technical experts on staff who act as a part of your team when you need advanced technical skills. So the training of your managed services provider's employees is a sign that the company invests back in your business. Such training programs are going and include management and cybersecurity topics. If the case, a good managed services provider can and will assist you in your technology planning for the future. So their advice should assist you in optimizing budgets and improving infrastructure efficiency. Make sure your managed services provider is forward thinking, proactive, and has a long term strategy mindset. As for case studies or references alongside certifications, having dealt with similar projects is always a plus. Another important factor when looking for a managed services provider is optimization and improvement over time. A services provider applies industry best practices and has a service improvement strategy in place. ETL best practices include changes, configurations, and performance management, as well as reporting. So a managed services provider should also have a management system that enables staff from any location to access problem and resolution information. So leading managed services provider will have standardized documents and procedures to endorse and showcase the quality of their services. You should also check availability and a proactive approach. Now, especially if your organization rushed its digital transformation, the chance for downtimes increases. And with downtimes, the risk of your data or processes being damaged rises. But the selected managed services provider should be highly available and respond quickly to your needs and problems. Now, be clear about SLA times in your service request. Although this should primarily be done remotely, proximity is also important as you should be able to visit and have face-to-face meetings. Find out whether the managed services provider has a break fix mentality or a proactive approach that encourages not only problem prevention, but also continuous improvement. For some businesses, the temptation is to only fix problems, but a skilled managed services provider will make sure you are proactively evolving with technology. And it's crucial to select a managed services provider that will perform backups of the entire IT environment regularly. So to prevent your business when facing disruptions or any kind of outages, a good managed services provider will help you plan, protect your data, and make sure your business can recover from a disruptive event. You should look for a provider that not only offers simple monitoring and device management, but can also empower your business by analyzing failure patterns across platforms and processes, emphasizing areas for customer and service improvement. You should look for managed services providers that have such capabilities. It is also important to focus on consistent processes and global service delivery. Now, consistent service delivery can be built only on stable, reliable processes with a repeatable methodology. The chosen managed services provider should have processes that can be replicated across multiple delivery teams. It is also important to know how you will have visibility to data and how you will measure the performance of managed services. Focus discussions on real data and KPIs to understand how managed services will impact your business and what to expect in terms of investment return. Keep in mind that a managed services provider with end-to-end capabilities ensures a successful delivery, rapid implementation in new locations, and better scalability of teams and team effort. Another important element is the performance-based service level agreement, or SLA. Now, a leading managed services provider is ready to innovate, improve, and reduce costs to mutual benefit. Both your company and the provider should be willing to contractually commit to meeting a service level requirement and agreement. Now, the best way to assess the commitment level is to consult the documented service level agreement, the SLA. It can vary from case to case and it should be adapted to your business needs. An SLA should cover both the problem reporting process and the distinction between the different levels of severity of the various problems. Metrics to report on performance levels are also outlined in the SLAs. And this way, CDOs can use the agreement process to better understand what they should expect from their managed services provider. By documenting clear capabilities, clients can enable providers to develop an understanding of their obligations and help them meet their service level agreements. Typically, SLAs should be quantitatively measurable and easy to understand. To ensure that SLAs are effective, triggers and penalties help you receive customer credit if terms are not met. However, a trusted managed services partner will rarely miss their SLA. And finally, there is the flexibility and innovation that come with a long-term partnership. Now, you might at some point want the flexibility to add specific managed services to your outsourcing strategy without unnecessary cost and complexity that hiring an internal team would bring. Using multiple providers for managed services can result in a costly strategy, even though outsourcing by process might seem a good idea. For future flexibility, have a look at providers that offer a vast suite of managed services, from infrastructure and application management to 24/7 monitoring and support. Flexibility in doing business with you should also be a decisive factor when collaborating with a new managed services provider. It is important to consider the impact sourcing relationships can have when ensuring long-term company growth. Our trusted managed services provider is adaptable and can scale resources and customized solutions to meet your business goals. It takes over a part of the operational burden, allowing your company to focus on growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Catalin, for giving us these 6 useful guidelines to look out for when choosing a managed services provider. I believe there's a lot of information to digest and maybe some questions raised, so I'd like to reserve the last few minutes of our webinar for a short Q&A session. I think we already have one, so in a nutshell, what would your key arguments be for convincing someone to partner up with a managed services provider instead of just relying on their in-house IT department? Catalin, would you care to answer this?
Definitely. So, as my colleague Bundan mentioned earlier, choosing a managed services model simply means that you choose a higher growth rate for your company, which is based on a robust cost optimization, time efficiency in operational performance, and of course, modernization. I mean, in such a dynamic IT environment where changes occurs 24/7, all companies require a steady hand when it comes to maintaining infrastructure, application reliability, security, and flexibility. Thus, managed services does not even need an elevator pitch nowadays. It's a must.
Thank you, Catalin. Another question came in the meantime. Could you tell us what are your service areas as a managed services provider? Catalin?
Of course, accesa can take care of an entire IT environment from infrastructure services, applications, monitoring, and storage to security services. Now, in terms of areas, our portfolio covers infrastructure, DevOps, and SRE services, 24/7 support, applications and platform support, and modern workplace. So anything from cloud automation, cloud migration, Azure migration, or VMware infrastructure assessment, architecture design, and migration. So we do infrastructure management, backup solution management, server performance management, and batching, etc. We're also proficient in delivering CI/CD services, tooling integration and implementation, release engineering, and more. So our 24/7 support services are fully aligned from active monitoring to technical support, application support, incident management, 365 infrastructure availability. Now, it's clear that we have a lot in our managed services plate. So I'd be really happy to send you all the information in a more detailed email.
Thanks again, Katalin. One more question. You mentioned that it's important to have consistent metrics on performance levels in the SLAs. Could you give us more details on this?
Yeah, sure. So it's pretty obvious that the types of SLA metrics required will depend on the services being provided. Now, many items can be monitored as part of an SLA, but the scheme should be kept as simple as possible to avoid confusion and excessive cost on either side. In choosing metrics, examine your operation and decide what is most important. And depending on the service, the types of metric to monitor may include service availability, meaning the amount of time the service is available for use, and this may be measured by time slots with percentages of availability within a set of hours and more or less availability specified during other times. Now, another metric could be the defect rates, as in counts or percentages of errors in major deliverables, like income backups, coding errors, missed deadlines. These are included in this area. Technical quality can be another metric, especially in outsourced application development. Security is also highly important since application and network security breaches can be really costly. These are just a few examples of SLA metrics.
Thank you, Katalin, for answering these questions. I'd like to thank our guests today for sharing their insights about the rather complex world of managed services. And thank you all for listening. If you want to know more about our managed services offering, please visit discover.accesa.eu/managed services and get in touch with our teams of experts. Stay safe and goodbye.